Hi everyone, I'm Helen Tupper.
And I'm Sarah Ellis.
And you're listening to the Squiggly Careers podcast, where each week we talk about a topic to do with work, something that we think is relevant for most people right now, and share tools, tips and ideas for action to help you with your career. And this week, we are going to be talking about the topic of inspiration. It's something we've talked about before on the podcast, but actually we think that it's a bit different in our current context. So Sarah and I are going to talk a little bit about maybe how the last 12 months might have affected people's ability to get inspired at work, and how we can take a little bit more ownership for it ongoing and maybe reconnect a little bit with our inspiration. And I think where the idea for this topic came from was like my own realisation, as normal.
As always, this is basically just self-help for us.
So where this started was, I was thinking, well, I was feeling not particularly inspired. And because of what we do, we're always like writing articles and sharing things. So I can tell when I'm not feeling inspired, because it just makes that all a lot harder to come up with ideas. And what I realised for myself personally was that I have been consuming more information than I have inspiration, i.e. everything that I've been absorbing has been sort of to do with my day-to-day to help me get my job done, but I haven't really been consuming more unrelated articles and research that isn't sort of directly part of my day-to-day. And I think that's where the best ideas come, when you spend time reading different things and talking to different people and even in different places. And I shared this on Instagram, and somebody, a lady from Spark Unlimited, said to me in our chat, she said, "Oh, Helen, you have to collect the dots to connect the dots." And I was like, yes, I need to do some dot collecting so that I can come up with new ideas. So I think that's what we're trying to do for you today in the podcast, is to stimulate a bit of dot collection so that you can connect the dots to help you with your career. And the reason that that is important is because when you look at the research around inspiration, what it shows is that it leads to more creativity. And we know that that is one of the most important skills for work. If you look at a lot of the research that LinkedIn have done, for example, creativity comes up as one of the top skills that are needed for work. It improves people's self-esteem, which I thought was really interesting when people are more inspired, and also increases people's optimism. So it makes you feel more positive as well.
And one of the things I was reading was some work that psychologists Todd Thrash and Andrew Elliott have done, and they've spent years researching inspiration. They've identified that there are 3 things that happen when we're inspired. Of course, we feel more energised and motivated, as Helen said. I think that's probably what we expect, and that's what we're hoping for. But we also see new possibilities. So I suppose that's the connecting the dots that Helen mentioned. And also we're more receptive to outside influence, ideas, probably because we are spending time in different places and spaces. It just broadens our perspective, which is always really useful. And similar to Helen, I've been finding this much harder, I think, over the past 12 months. And I'm sure some of you will have read a recent article that Adam Grant did for the New York Times, which was all about this idea of the reason that we're not feeling great at the moment, or perhaps feeling a bit blah, as he described it, is that we are languishing. He kind of used this word, languishing, and it really caught the attention of a lot of people. I think probably because he has named that emotion. You know, you sense that something's not quite right, and as Adam is so good at doing, he kind of understood that and has helped people to kind of appreciate why we might be feeling as we're feeling. And then what I loved was that Austin Kleon, who wrote a book called Steal Like an Artist, as well as some others, and I've always really liked his work, he actually responded to that article and actually kind of argued that he's not languishing, that he's dormant. So his perspective was, well, actually, yes, I might not be as inspired as usual, but there's almost like no point, his argument was, trying to flourish under very difficult conditions. And actually what flourishing even looks like right now is so different to where we were before. And so often the problem, or kind of what I interpreted from also reading this, is you hold yourself to the standards and the kind of, you're looking for a sense of feeling inspired in the same way as you were pre-12, 18 months ago. I think that's what I'm kind of looking for, is I go, oh, well, I know how I used to feel really inspired and what I used to do. And you can't quite do that same thing at the moment. And actually what Austin Kleon is saying is it is okay to be dormant and to just be kind of waiting for the right moment. Doesn't mean that we can't take action and try out some of the things that we're going to talk to you about today, but also just recognizing that, we shouldn't kind of beat ourselves up, or just the expectations that we have of ourselves do need to be calibrated with also where we find ourselves right now, which I actually found both the articles, I think they're both brilliant, really well written and kind of thought through and reassuring. So perhaps have a look at those if that's interesting for you.
It makes me think about the difference between feeling like you're under pressure and that you're kind of feeling like you're priming yourself, i.e. if you're like, oh gosh, I need to be inspired. Like, I think if you're pressured on doing it, then it's almost like it's kind of anti-inspiration, because you don't kind of put your brain in that really open space where you can find out different ideas and work out how they all connect. Whereas this is more, I think, today about how you can prime yourself for it, so that when you are ready, your brain's ready for you. You've got some of those ideas and you're not starting from scratch, that you're kind of warmed up and ready for that inspiration to be there for you. So yeah, no pressure, everyone. If it does not feel like the right time for you to get inspired because life is what it is right now, then this is ready for you when you are. So we have got 4 different ways for you to kind of prime your mind for inspiration. And some of these I have been doing very recently as part of my collecting dots. So maybe, Sarah, if I go first with my one. So I think one thing that you can do, particularly if you're feeling a bit disconnected from inspiration, is you can immerse yourself in it, but for quite a short period of time. So what I did was I took a week, and every day I tried to read, watch, or listen to something out of the norm for me. So some of these things might not be out of the norm for you, but these weren't the things that I was consuming. And I think in my normal day-to-day, I also wasn't really prioritizing them. And I spent a week every day engaging with something slightly different to really give me almost that like Kickstarter for my inspiration. Now, the reality is I probably couldn't keep that up. I mean, I haven't kept it up. But what it has done is it's just made me a little bit more aware of different sources of information and spending time in different places. I feel like I've reclaimed my morning a little bit as well, because that was when I did it. I am a morning person. So I got up, I had a sort of a reason to get up and not hit the snooze button, and I knew what I was going to be engaging with. So for example, this is kind of a way that you could do this immersive inspiration. Pick a different thing to engage with and a time of the day where you can protect that time. So I did mornings, and I had like a Monday morning, I watched a TED Talk. On Tuesday, listen to a different podcast. Wednesday, I kind of engaged with a different online article. On Thursday, a curious conversation. So that was towards the end of the week, so I could plan it. So that was a conversation with someone not connected to my day-to-day work. And on Friday, an online course. And I actually did one about art, which I wouldn't normally spend a bit of a morning doing a short online course. It's like 30 minutes on art. But for me, I made sure those things, it wasn't the normal TED Talk on a topic I would normally watch about careers, for example. It wasn't an online article from a place that I normally read. And it just gave me that little bit of a Kickstarter and put me into connection with a few different places to learn from that I will definitely stick with going forward. I probably just won't do it in such a immersive way every day.
Yeah, I think sometimes just almost like really going for it just gets you started, doesn't it? And actually, if it's a week, it feels doable. Not too difficult, and also something where you can it doesn't sound like you did loads of time every day. So how much time do you think you spent? 30 minutes?
Yeah, 30 minutes in the morning, and I quite look forward to it. And the point around priming that I mentioned. So during that week, I was doing a podcast interview with somebody called Dory Clark, which is an interview that will come out shortly. Everybody, a bit of a teaser there. And we were chatting about curiosity generally. And I then asked her, I said, I'm doing this thing this week. I'm trying to read some different things. Where do you get some of your inspiration from? And then she started telling me some of the things that she was reading, and so I kind of borrowed some ideas from her. And I don't think I would have asked that question if I hadn't primed myself for it in this week. It was just making me a little bit more, what does Sarah like watching? And I could ask that person what podcast they're listening to at the moment. And it just helped me much more to get new sources of inspiration.
It's that conscious bias, isn't it? When you're focused on something, then you find other things and you ask different questions. So the second idea we've got is about what Helen just described there. I think it really is about individual inspiration, which I think is really useful, and you can curate that in whatever way works for you. I also think what's really helpful is not feeling like you also have to find and spend your time being inspired by yourself. And collective curiosity can be really useful because you can all help each other. And actually, the best example of this I've seen is not us, actually, Amazing If. We've sort of tried this out, but probably not quite found the right way of doing this for us, I don't think, yet. I think we're probably both better at individual inspiration, and then we share it as we go. But I worked in one company where we used Slack, so a bit like Teams, or depending on whatever you use in your company. And we had a Slack channel. It was just called Staying Curious. Really kind of simple, does what it says on the tin. But everybody did share really interesting links to videos, something they'd read or something they'd seen. And there wasn't a theme. It didn't have to feel really kind of work related or about a specific brief. It was just anything you'd spotted that had sort of inspired you or you'd found interesting. I think because everybody committed to it, but not in a, oh, you must post one thing a day way. It wasn't like a forced inspiration, but everybody found it useful quite quickly. So therefore, everybody just kept contributing their curiosity to it. And you just feel like it felt like a very small moment of inspiration every day, spending 10 minutes on that channel. And it could be such a short amount of time, but it made you step away from the day to day and also spend time with people and in places that perhaps you wouldn't have done anyway. So I think if you don't already have this in your organisation or just in your team, I think you can do this in a really small way, just 2 or 3 of you. Think about how could you also spend some time getting inspired together, whether that's creating something like a Teams channel or a WhatsApp together, or whether it's even just something like spending time once or twice a week for 15 minutes, half an hour, doing something that will just help you to feel inspired. Maybe it is watching a talk, maybe it's spending some time on something like Tortoise or TED or 5x15 talks. I sort of have these places that I know that when I go to them, they will give me some inspiration, but I always prefer that inspiration when I'm with other people, whether that's people I don't know and they're just live events, or whether that's people from within Amazing If. So perhaps give that collective curiosity a go.
Yeah, I feel like we should do more of that together.
Yeah, we should as a team. Yeah, we definitely
we should. Our team at Amazing If is growing. So that's a business that Sarah and I run. And I'm always very conscious of practicing what we preach within our business. But we're so busy helping other people that I think, we need to make sure we are definitely doing those things for ourselves and for the people that we work with and work for us as well. So yeah, maybe that's one for us to take away. Our third idea for action actually goes back to the point that Sarah picked out around, how much time are you spending doing this every day, Helen, when I was doing my immersive thing. And the third idea is actually about doing it even quicker than what I was doing, which was 30 minutes a day. And it's the idea of instant inspiration. So almost like these little sparks in your day that are the quickest way that you can take your brain to a different space. And there are lots of different ways you can do this, and some might feel better for you, you might enjoy it more, but things like an inspiring quote. Maybe every day you're going to look at a different quote. That's something that I do when I'm journaling every day, and I find that quite helpful. It always sparks my thoughts when I'm doing that. Something like, if you're on Instagram, something like Vex King, he has lots of different quotes. Or Sarah and I really like an account called the @NewHappyCo, and they're less
so
quotes.
Good. I
so
love
good.
That account.
Yeah, it's such, and they're less quotes, but they are very short. Like you can look, there's like a different visual concept to do with happiness every single day, and just looking at that just might inspire you to think differently or connect some dots in different ways. I like poetry, and so I've got a book. Did you buy me this? Somebody bought me a poem for every day of the year.
I bought you this.
I think you might have bought me that.
I want credit for this.
You can have the credit. There you go, credit granted. But yeah, I have loads of poetry books, but I like that one because it's a poem for every day of the year. And sometimes I read them and I go, oh, that's nice. And sometimes I like, I don't get that at all. but it just, again, I don't read poetry that much, but that just takes my brain to a slightly different place than my to-do list, for example. Maybe it's music for you. If you use Spotify, they have loads of like mood music. I was listening to the Good Energy playlist the other day, quite like that in my office. Exercise, that's actually proven to be a way that some people get inspired. If you like exercise, if that works for you. There are obviously apps like Fit app that you can use, and you can just put in like 5 minutes and there'll be some very short exercise you can do. Or even art. So I mentioned, I did that course on the Friday. There's a daily art app that I ended up downloading during my week. And my last one would be doodling. I think this could be quite a cool thing to do for like your very instant inspiration. There is a challenge going on at the moment on, I'm going to say this wrong, @doodle-a-doo. Okay, so that's @doodle-a-doo. So that's the word doodle followed by LE DO, at Doodle-a-Doo. And it's basically the one doodle a day challenge. And again, I think that would just take your brain to a slightly different place than diving into your inbox first thing might do.
And our last idea for action is about saying yes to things that have the potential to provide you with inspiration. I was reflecting on this for myself, and I was thinking so often I think we say no to these things because they feel like they're perhaps on the periphery of our days. They take extra time. We feel like we're too busy. We just don't prioritise them. We can come up with loads of reasons to say no to things that have the potential to inspire us just because we don't get that instant gratification or tick on our to-do list. And so it just feels like too hard to make happen, perhaps. And I'm someone who I never respond particularly well, or I've never been very successful, is probably a better way of putting it, at anything that is too routine or ritual based. So all those things that Helen describes and that she does so well just never really work for me because variety is one of my values. I don't really like doing the same thing every day. And so I think more about, well, what do I say yes to that I think has the potential to inspire me? Kind of without necessarily knowing exactly what you're going to get as a result. But I think you can start to spot those things that you can say yes to. For example, there are a few things that I've got coming up in the next few months because, again, like Helen, I was feeling exactly the same, not getting the inspiration or feeling as inspired as I would like to be. But the way that I would respond is probably quite different to Helen. And so I've signed up to something called the Uncertainty Experiment, which is something that Sam Conniff, who is the author of a book called Be More Pirate, is running. And I know Sam, and he always does really interesting things. I suspect it's something that's going to make me quite uncomfortable. I don't really understand what it is, to be honest. You know, it's one of those things where I looked at it and thought, don't really understand what this is. But the people involved look really interesting. People I've never met before, like the idea of it. And he's doing something really different. I was just going, that would be so easy to say no to because you just feel like you've got so many other things you could be spending your time on. But that was a good example of where I was like, right, I'm going to say yes to that and I'm going to really prioritise the time that it takes. It's quite a big time commitment. I think the experiment is 3 or 4 sessions together. Again, I don't really understand exactly what it is, but I've just sort of said yes and I'm just going to go with the flow. And then the second thing that we're doing, and actually that you can all listening get involved in if you'd like to, is in a couple of weeks' time, we're going to be doing a Pod Plus at the end of May, the last Thursday in May it is. We do our Pod Plus sessions on a Thursday morning for half an hour, and we're going to do a bit of a takeover on that May session where we're going to do a kind of pod and plod. So we're actually going to do a walk together guided by David Pearl, who's been on the podcast before, so you might have listened to his episode. He's the founder of something called Street Wisdom. He wrote a book called Wonderful, as in to wonder. And there's quite a lot of evidence about when we get our mind in motion, i.e. when we're walking and when we're moving, it's how we get inspired. We do connect dots in different ways, which is a kind of idea that we've talked about before. And so again, that was something when David and his team suggested, oh, would we ever want to, as a podcast community, kind of all do a podcast where we all go for a walk at the same time and get inspired in a different way? Easy to say no to because you think, okay, well, I've got to organise that, I've got to make that happen. How do we communicate that? It is a bit different. So there's a bit of effort and complexity around it. But I just could spot in that potential for inspiration. So I thought, do you know what? Just say yes. Hopefully it'll be worth it. It'll be worth it for us and what we get to do, but hopefully something that we can also offer to all of our listeners as well. So if you're interested in that, it'll be free like all of our other Pod Plus sessions are. If you follow us on Instagram where we're at Amazing If, you'll see all the kind of details for that.
I'll put the link to it as well in the show notes. So that mainly shows up, I think, on Apple. So if you're listening on Apple, that might be easier to find. Otherwise, head to Instagram. Also, just before we leave you to your days, whatever you're doing with your days after listening to this podcast, and just to let you know that we have been behind the scenes, very busy, creating some new assets for you to support this podcast. So there are some pod sheets that we are producing, which means that for every episode going forward, and I'm working on the backlog at the same time, but for every episode going forward, you will be able to download an interactive, editable PDF, which has some of the key points that we've covered. So like the 4 things we've covered today, for example, some quotes, and also some coach yourself questions. So we get so many messages from people that say, I listen to you while I'm walking the dog and I don't have a pen, or I'm running and I forget what you said. And hopefully this is a way that you can spend a little bit more time reflecting after you've listened and support you taking action, and to help other people take action too. So you can find all of those resources from episode 200 onwards. And I'm working on a backlog, as I said. All of those are on amazingif.com. So just go to the listen page and you'll find this podcast. You'll be able to download that pod sheet. We'd love some feedback on that, and anything else that could help you with the podcast, anything else that could help you with your learning, just get in touch with us. It's just helenandsarah@squigglycareers.com. We would love your feedback on anything that's working and anything you think could be even better. Always open to that.
And if you're listening to this and you have ideas, or you've done things particularly over the last 12 months that have really helped you to stay inspired at work, please do share them with us, because when we get lots of ideas, we'll usually find a way of putting these things together, or we'll perhaps try and share them in a future episode. So the more that we can kind of all help each other, this is not just about us sharing our ideas. Please do always get in touch if you think, oh, we've done this brilliant thing at our company or our work, and you'd love to share it. We always love to hear from you.
So thank you very much for spending your time with us, and Sarah and I will be back with you very soon.
Thanks everybody. Speak to you again soon. Bye for now.
Bye.